In a small town surrounded by quiet hills and dusty roads, there lived a young girl named Emily Carter. She wasn't the kind of person anyone noticed much. She was simple, quiet, and always seemed to be lost in her own thoughts. While most girls, her age, spent their time gossiping or scrolling through their phones, Emily spent her evenings sitting by her window, humming songs softly to herself. Music was her comfort, her little escape from a world that never seemed to understand her. Her voice wasn't something she had trained professionally. It was something that came straight from her heart. Every time she sang, it was like she was telling her story to the wind. But no one else heard it. No one cared enough to listen. Her parents loved her deeply, but life in the Carter family wasn't easy. Her father worked long hours at a local garage, fixing cars for a living, while her mother worked at a grocery store nearby. Money was tight, and dreams like singing often sounded too expensive and too impossible. Still, Emily dreamed. She didn't dream of fame or luxury. She just dreamed of standing on a stage once in her life, singing her heart out to people who truly listened. In school, however, that dream often became a reason for laughter. Emily wasn't popular. She didn't dress in fancy clothes or hang out with the so-called cool group. She was the quiet one who sat at the back of the class, writing lyrics in her notebook while everyone else chatted. When someone asked her what she wanted to be in life, she would softly say, "A singer," and that was enough to make people laugh. "Yeah, right, Emily," one girl once said, rolling her eyes. "You can't even talk loud enough in class. How are you going to sing in front of people?" Her words stung, but Emily didn't reply. She just smiled faintly and went back to her notes. She had learned that silence was sometimes stronger than arguments. Every night, after finishing her homework and helping her mother wash dishes, she would sit by the old window in her small room. There was an old keyboard that her uncle had gifted her years ago. It was missing 2 keys and sometimes made strange buzzing sounds, but to Emily it was precious. It was her world. She would plug in her cheap earphones, play soft chords, and sing quietly so no one in the house could hear. Sometimes her mother would peek in and smile. "You sound lovely, sweetheart," she would say softly. "Maybe one day people will listen." Emily's heart always warmed at those words. Then, one afternoon, something happened that would change everything. She was walking back home after school, her backpack heavy, her mind full of music as always, when she saw a large poster on the wall of the town's community center. It was bright red, with bold letters that said, "Open Auditions, City Singing Competition. Everyone welcome." She stopped in her tracks and stared at it. Her heart began to race. It was the kind of competition she had only watched on TV before. A big stage, real judges, real audiences. The thought of standing there both scared and excited her at the same time. For a few seconds she imagined it, the lights, the crowd, the microphone in her hand. And then came the doubts. "What if I freeze?" she whispered to herself. "What if they laugh at me?" She stood there for a long time, staring at that poster. Finally, she tore off one of the small paper slips at the bottom with the registration link and phone number. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind going back and forth. "Maybe I shouldn't go," she thought. "I'm not trained, I don't have fancy clothes, and I've never sung in front of people." But then another voice whispered inside her, the one that always spoke softly when the world got too loud. "If you don't try, you'll never know." The next morning, she made up her mind. After school, she went straight to the internet cafe in town. Her hands were shaking as she filled out the online form. When it asked for her stage name, she typed simply, "Emily Carter." She clicked Submit. For the next few days, she practiced every moment she could. After homework, after dinner, before school, she sang until her voice ached. Her father noticed the change in her energy. One evening, he put down his newspaper and asked, "You've been singing more than usual lately, kiddo. Something up?" Emily hesitated but finally told him about the audition. Her father listened quietly, then smiled a little. "Well," he said, "I guess it's time people outside this house hear what we hear every night." Her mother beamed with pride. "We'll be right there with you," she said. But Emily shook her head. "I think I want to go alone, Mom. I want to do this myself." Her mother understood. Sometimes dreams need space to grow. The day of the audition came sooner than she expected. The city was 2 hours away, and Emily took an early morning bus. She wore her best dress, a simple blue one her mother had ironed for her, and carried her old notebook filled with songs. On the bus ride, she watched the world pass by through the window, her reflection mixing with the morning light. Her stomach churned with nervous energy. She had never done anything like this before. She looked at other passengers, some with headphones, some chatting, and wondered if they ever felt this kind of fear. When she reached the audition hall, she was stunned. The building was huge, and hundreds of people were already there. Some wore glittering outfits, others carried guitars or makeup kits. There were people rehearsing loudly, showing off their vocal range, laughing confidently. Emily stood quietly at the back, holding her bag close. She didn't know where to go, so she followed a group toward the registration desk. A cheerful volunteer handed her a badge with her number on it. She pinned it to her dress and found a corner to sit in. The air was full of noise, people talking, singing, warming up their voices. She felt small among them, like a drop in an ocean of talent. She tried to practice quietly under her breath, but her voice trembled. Nearby, 2 girls noticed her and whispered, "Look at her," one of them said softly, giggling. "She's so nervous already. She probably sings in her shower," the other added. They laughed quietly, not realizing Emily could hear every word. Her throat tightened and she looked away, pretending not to care. But inside, her heart sank. Still, she didn't leave. Something inside her refused to walk away. When her turn was called, she stood up slowly, clutching her notebook. Her knees felt weak. The staff member at the door gave her a quick, bored look and said, "Next." Emily stepped into the audition room. There were 3 judges sitting at a table surrounded by cameras and equipment. They looked tired, probably from hearing dozens of contestants before her. One of them barely looked up as she walked in. "Name?" he asked without much interest. "Emily Carter," she said softly. "All right," he said. "Whenever you're ready." Emily took a deep breath and looked at the microphone. It looked so big, so professional, like something from another world. She felt her hands tremble. Her heart was beating so loudly she thought the judges could hear it. For a moment she wanted to run. But then she remembered her mother's words. Maybe one day people will listen. So she closed her eyes, and just before she sang her first note, the same 2 girls who had mocked her earlier peeked through the door, whispering and laughing again. Emily saw them for a second, but this time she didn't let their laughter reach her heart. She smiled softly to herself. "This is for me," she thought. And then she opened her mouth to sing. The room was brighter than she expected, but strangely cold. The lights above the stage made her eyes blink rapidly as she tried to adjust. She could feel her own heartbeat in her ears. The 3 judges sat behind a long table. One of them was scrolling through a phone. Another was writing something down, and the third looked at her with a polite but tired smile. Emily stood there quietly, holding her small notebook. Her throat was dry, her hands slightly shaking. She opened her mouth to introduce herself, but her voice came out softer than she wanted. Hello. My name is Emily Carter," she said. The judge with the phone didn't even look up. The one who was writing something simply nodded and said, "All right, go ahead when you're ready." The words felt heavy. She looked at the microphone in front of her, tall, silver, and slightly intimidating. She took a step closer. Somewhere deep inside, her courage began to slip away. Then she remembered why she was there. She had promised herself she wouldn't run. She had practiced for days, believing this moment could change her life. Even if no one cared, she was going to sing. She took a slow breath, closed her eyes for a second, and started. But before her first note came out, a sudden burst of laughter echoed from the waiting area outside. It distracted her. Her eyes opened for a second. She saw through the small open door 2 contestants peeking in, the same girls from earlier. They were laughing quietly, pointing at her nervous stance. Her chest tightened. Her confidence wavered. One of the judges sighed loudly. "Can you start already?" he said, clearly impatient. Yes, she stammered, taking another breath. The first few seconds of her song came out shaky. Her voice trembled slightly, but she pushed through. She sang one line, then another, trying to steady her breathing. The judges looked at each other briefly. "All right, that's enough," one of them said after barely 30 seconds. Emily froze. I can do better," she whispered, but the words didn't come out loud enough. The judge shrugged. "We have many people waiting. Thank you." The assistant by the door motioned for her to leave. Her heart broke a little. She hadn't even gotten to the best part of her song, the one she had practiced the most. She wanted to scream, to explain that she wasn't just nervous, that she could really sing if they just gave her a chance, but no one was listening. As she walked out, she heard faint chuckles again. The two girls were whispering, "Told you she'd choke." She bit her lip to keep her tears from falling. Her chest felt heavy, her mind foggy. She walked past them without saying a word. Outside, she found a quiet bench near the corner of the hall. She sat down, still holding her notebook tightly. The sounds of music, laughter, and conversation from other contestants filled the air, but she felt far away from all of it. For a few minutes, she just sat there, staring at the floor. Every bit of confidence she had built in the past few weeks seemed to disappear. She felt small, invisible, and foolish for even trying. Then suddenly someone sat down next to her. It was a man who looked a little older, maybe in his late 20s, with a guitar strapped on his back. He had seen her performance. "You were up there, right?" he asked kindly. Emily nodded, not trusting her voice. He smiled a little. "You've got a sweet tone. Don't let them make you feel bad. They stop people fast when they're running late. It doesn't mean you're not good." She looked at him, surprised by the kindness in his voice. "You think so?" she asked softly. He nodded. "You just need to believe it yourself. Auditions can be cruel sometimes, but real talent always finds a way. You'll see." Those words stayed in her head long after he left. She sat there for a while longer, listening to the faint sound of someone singing inside the hall. The crowd clapped. Then another contestant went in, and another came out, smiling proudly or crying quietly. As the day went on, Emily stayed until the end, unsure why. Maybe she wanted to prove to herself that she could stay, that she wouldn't run away again. By the time the auditions ended, the hall began to empty. She stood up slowly and started to leave. On her way out, she passed by the table where one of the assistants was packing up the papers. She wanted to ask how she could apply again, or maybe come back next time. But before she could say anything, the assistant looked up and said, "Oh, you're the one from earlier, right? Sorry, honey, maybe next time. You seemed really nervous." It wasn't meant to be cruel, but the words stung anyway. Emily forced a small smile. "Yeah, maybe next time," she said softly. Outside, the evening had turned cold. The sky was fading into a soft orange, and the wind carried the faint sounds of traffic and city life. Emily walked slowly toward the bus stop, her small blue dress fluttering in the wind. She found a seat at the bus stop and looked around. People were laughing, talking on phones, scrolling through messages. The world kept moving as if nothing had happened. But inside her, everything felt quiet. She took out her notebook and opened it to a page where she had written one of her favorite quotes. "If you can't find a stage, sing where you stand." She read those words over and over again. When she got home, her mother was waiting at the door. "How did it go?" she asked gently. Emily tried to smile, but her eyes gave her away. "They didn't let me finish," she said softly. Her mother hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you for even trying," she said. "Most people don't even have the courage to walk into that room." Her father came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands. "You did your part, kiddo. That's what matters. Sometimes the world needs time to see what's right in front of them." Emily nodded, but inside she felt a mix of pain and determination. That night, after everyone went to sleep, she sat by her window again. The same old keyboard was there waiting. She ran her fingers across the keys, pressing them softly, listening to the broken, uneven sounds. Then she started singing quietly. Not for the judges, not for the people who laughed, but for herself. Her voice was soft but full of emotion. She sang through her sadness, her hope, and her stubborn belief that she wasn't done yet. The moonlight fell on her notebook, on the words she had scribbled days ago. Dreams don't end just because someone didn't see them. She smiled faintly as she sang. The next morning, she woke up feeling different. The hurt was still there, but so was something else, a quiet strength. She went online and found that the audition had multiple rounds in different cities. The one she had attended was just a preliminary selection. There was another one scheduled for the next weekend in a neighboring city. Her heart skipped a beat. She read the details twice. There was a small note that said, "Walk-in entries accepted if time allows." She didn't know if they'd let her try again, but the thought of staying silent bothered her more than the fear of failing again. So she made a decision. She would go again. She would walk in with the same notebook, the same voice, and this time, no matter what anyone said or did, she would sing her full song. That evening, she practiced again. Her voice cracked a few times, but she didn't stop. She sang with every ounce of emotion she had. Sadness, anger, hope, and love all mixed together. Her mother watched from the doorway with quiet tears in her eyes. "That's my girl," she whispered. Emily didn't hear her. She was too lost in the song. She didn't know that the world was about to hear her too, soon, in a way that would surprise everyone. The morning of the second audition arrived quietly, with soft sunlight slipping through the window curtains. Emily woke up before her alarm, her heart already racing. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, remembering everything that had happened a week ago. The laughter, the rejection, the disappointment. It still hurt a little, but this time it didn't stop her. She sat up, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "This time, I'll finish my song." Downstairs, her mother was already awake, packing her lunch. The smell of toast filled the small kitchen. When Emily walked in, her mother smiled softly. "You're really going again?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Emily nodded. "Yes, I don't want to give up yet." Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then go, my girl. Sing the way you do when you're alone at home. Don't sing for them. Sing for yourself." Her father came in holding a cup of tea. "Remember," he said gently, "every person who made it big was told no many times before they heard their first yes." Emily smiled gratefully. She didn't have fancy clothes or makeup like the other contestants, but she felt ready. She wore the same blue dress, neatly ironed again, and tied her hair back simply. Her small notebook was tucked inside her bag, along with her lucky pen. The bus ride to the next city felt both long and short at the same time. Her mind replayed every detail of the last audition, the judges' bored faces, the laughter from the waiting area, and that awful feeling of walking out unfinished. But each time the memory tried to scare her, she pushed it away. "This is a new chance," she whispered to herself. "I'm not that nervous girl anymore." When the bus reached the city, she saw the same posters again, bright, colorful, and full of excitement. She could already hear faint music as she approached the building. This time it was a bigger venue with more people, louder voices, and flashing lights from cameras. She joined the line outside, clutching her registration form. The people around her looked more confident than ever. Some were chatting about their past performances, others warming up their voices loudly. "Did you perform last week?" one girl next to her asked. Emily nodded slightly. "Yes, but I didn't get very far." The girl laughed lightly, not unkindly, but without much interest. "Happens to most people. You just have to be louder this time." Emily smiled politely, but inside she knew loudness wasn't what made her special. It was her emotion, her honesty when she sang. That was what she wanted people to feel. After a long wait, she finally got her number and went inside. The waiting area was crowded again, filled with nervous energy. Assistants ran around with clipboards calling names, guiding people to the stage one by one. Emily found a quiet corner and sat down, taking slow breaths. She watched others perform through the small glass window near the stage. Some got cheers, others came out wiping tears. The judges looked serious as ever, their faces barely changing. It was then that she heard familiar laughter again. Turning slightly, she saw the same two girls from the last audition. They noticed her too, and one of them whispered something to the other. Both laughed just like before. Emily's stomach twisted for a second, but she didn't look away. She just kept her eyes on the floor, repeating silently, "It doesn't matter. Not this time." When her number was finally called, her palms were sweaty, but her heart was strong. She stood up, grabbed her notebook, and walked toward the stage door. The assistant standing by the entrance gave her a tired glance. You've been here before, right? Yes, Emily said quietly. I came last week. The assistant smiled faintly. Back again, huh? Well, that's brave. Good luck. Her words gave Emily a tiny spark of confidence. As she stepped inside the audition hall again, everything looked the same. The long table, the bright lights, the cameras, but this time, she felt different. Her heart was steady. The same 3 judges sat there. They didn't seem to recognize her. One of them was sipping coffee, another looking at a tablet, and the third adjusting the microphone. Name? One of them asked without looking up. Emily Carter, she replied, her voice calm. The judge nodded.
All right, Emily, what will you be singing today?
Emily smiled softly. It's a song I wrote myself. That got their attention slightly. The judge with the coffee looked up briefly, interested. All right, let's hear it. She took her place in front of the microphone. For a second, she closed her eyes. She remembered her room, her old keyboard, the moonlight from her window, and her mother's voice saying, "Sing for yourself." When she opened her eyes, she saw one of the girls peeking through the doorway again, smirking. But this time, Emily didn't let it break her. She gave a small smile and turned back to the microphone. Her lips parted and she began to sing softly. Her voice started low and gentle, like a whisper carried by the wind. The first line was full of emotion, a quiet story of someone chasing a dream no one believed in. The hall was still. Even the assistant by the door paused. But halfway through her second line, she felt something in her chest, fear trying to creep in again. Her throat tightened for a moment. The memory of the last rejection flashed in her mind. The judges' bored faces, the sound of someone saying, "That's enough." For a split second, she almost stopped. The thought came fast and heavy. What if they cut me off again? What if I mess up? Her heart began to pound. Her fingers trembled around the microphone. The lights felt hotter, but then she caught sight of her small notebook resting on the table nearby. The pages were slightly bent, with one line written across the top in her handwriting. You only lose when you stop singing. Something inside her shifted. She took another breath, closed her eyes again, and let go of the fear. Her next note came out strong, pure, and steady. It filled the room in a way even she hadn't expected. The sound echoed off the walls, reaching every corner. The judge with the coffee slowly put the cup down. The one holding the tablet stopped typing. Emily didn't notice any of it. She was lost in her song. Each word carried her heart, every note carried her struggle, and every rise and fall of her voice told a story. It was the story of being invisible, being laughed at, being ignored, but still believing. When she reached the chorus, her voice soared. It was rich and powerful, full of emotion. The hall stayed completely silent except for her. Even the girls outside stopped whispering. She finished the last note softly, letting it fade into the quiet. For a long moment, no one said anything. Then one of the judges leaned forward slightly. "Can you sing that last part again?" he asked, his tone different this time, gentler, almost curious. Emily blinked, surprised. "Of course," she said softly. She sang the final lines again, her voice trembling with feeling but never breaking. This time, when she finished, the silence was followed by a sound she hadn't heard before, clapping. The assistant by the door started it. Then one of the crew members joined, and then even one of the judges smiled and clapped softly. Emily felt her chest tighten, not from fear, but from joy. For a second, she just stood there, unsure what to do. One of the judges spoke first. "That was beautiful," he said simply. "You have something very honest in your voice. It's not about perfection, it's about truth. And you have that." Emily felt her eyes sting with tears. She bowed her head slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. The same judge added, "I think we might have cut you off too early last week. I'm glad you came back." Her lips trembled, but she smiled. "I'm glad I did too," she said softly. As she walked off the stage, she heard faint applause from a few people waiting outside. Even the 2 girls who had mocked her before were quiet, their faces unreadable. Emily didn't care what they thought anymore. She had done it. She had sung her song completely with no fear and no regrets. When she stepped outside the hall, the sky was glowing orange with the setting sun. The city noise buzzed in the distance, but for her, everything felt peaceful. She sat on the steps, took out her notebook, and wrote one line under her quote. Sometimes you don't need the world to believe in you. You just need one good moment to believe in yourself. She closed the notebook, smiled softly, and looked up at the sky. For the first time, she felt like her voice truly belonged somewhere. The next few days felt like a dream Emily didn't want to wake up from. She couldn't stop thinking about the moment she had finished her song, the quiet in the room, the clapping, and the soft smile on the judge's face. It was the first time in her life that people had truly listened to her voice, not just heard it. When she got home that evening, her parents were waiting anxiously. The moment she opened the door, her mother's face lit up. "How did it go this time?" she asked quickly, unable to hide her curiosity. Emily smiled shyly. "It went well," she said softly. "They listened, really listened." Her father put his newspaper down, his eyes full of pride. "I told you," he said. "When you sing with heart, people feel it. That's something no training can teach." They sat together at the dinner table that night, and for the first time in a long time the house was filled with laughter. Emily felt lighter, freer, as if the heavy weight of doubt had finally lifted off her shoulders. A week later, she got a call from the organizers. They told her she had passed the second round and had been selected for the main stage audition in front of a live audience. Her hand shook as she held the phone. She could barely believe what she was hearing. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes," the woman on the phone replied cheerfully. "You'll be performing in front of a full audience next week. We'll send you the details." After the call, Emily sat down on her bed, staring at her hands in disbelief. The same hands that once trembled with fear were now holding her first real opportunity. Tears filled her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of gratitude. Her mother came running when she heard her shout of excitement. "What happened?" Emily could barely speak. I made it to the next round, Mom. The real stage." Her mother hugged her tightly, tears in her own eyes. "I knew it. I always knew it," she said softly. The following days were a blur of preparation. Emily practiced from morning till night. She rehearsed her song over and over, not because she was afraid to forget it, but because she wanted to make every word perfect. Every note had to carry her heart, her struggle, her story. Sometimes she would stop singing halfway and close her eyes, picturing the stage, the lights, the crowd. She imagined herself standing there, not as the shy girl who once got laughed at, but as someone who had finally found her place. The night before the performance, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying every possible moment of what could go right or wrong. Her heart was a storm of excitement and fear. At one point, she got up and went to her window. The moonlight spilled across her desk where her notebook lay open. She picked it up and flipped to the last page. There, she had written a single sentence a few days earlier. "One day, I'll sing, and they'll feel what I feel." She smiled and whispered, "Tomorrow is that day." When morning came, the city felt alive with energy. The big event was being held in a large auditorium with banners, lights, and a sea of people. Contestants walked around nervously, some chatting, others warming up. Emily stood quietly, clutching her small notebook, watching the stage crew set up microphones and cables. Her heart raced as she looked around. Cameras were everywhere, capturing moments for the audience watching from home. The show was being recorded for television too, something she had only ever dreamed of. One of the assistants came over and handed her a small card with her name and performance number. "You'll be going third," the assistant said. "Good luck." "Thank you," Emily replied, her voice calm even though her hands were shaking slightly. Backstage, the air buzzed with tension. Contestants whispered prayers, some practiced scales, and others tried to steady their breathing. Emily sat in a corner, eyes closed, silently repeating to herself, "I belong here. I belong here." She could hear the crowd cheering for the first contestant. Then the second performer went up and their song filled the hall with upbeat energy. The crowd clapped loudly as they finished. Then it was her turn. Her heart pounded so fast she could barely breathe. A crew member waved her forward. She took a deep breath, stood up, and walked slowly toward the stage. The lights hit her face as she stepped onto the platform. For a moment, the brightness blinded her. The crowd was huge, hundreds of faces, cameras flashing, judges sitting in the front row with serious expressions. She took her place in front of the microphone. The stage felt enormous, but she told herself, "It's just me and my song." A judge asked gently, What will you be singing today? Emily smiled softly. A song I wrote. It's about not giving up even when no one believes in you. The crowd grew quiet. Even the judges leaned forward slightly. The music began, a simple piano track that she had chosen because it felt closest to her heart. She closed her eyes and sang her first note. The sound was soft but pure, flowing like warm light through the air. The moment her voice touched the first note, something shifted in the room. People who had been whispering fell silent. The judges stopped writing. Even the stage crew froze for a second. Her voice was unlike anything rehearsed or polished. It was full of emotion, raw and real. Every word she sang carried pieces of her life. The laughter she had endured, the pain she had hidden, the hope she had never given up. Her song spoke of dreams that seemed too far away, of nights spent alone wondering if she was good enough, and of the strength it took to keep going when the world said she couldn't. By the time she reached the chorus, her voice had grown stronger, more confident. The audience could feel every emotion, every heartbeat in her melody. A camera zoomed in on the judges' faces. One of them, the same man who had dismissed her before, looked surprised, almost emotional. Another leaned forward with her hand on her chest, eyes glistening. Emily didn't see any of it. She was lost in the music. Her voice soared, echoing through the hall. People started recording on their phones. The same two girls who had laughed at her before were standing near the side of the stage. Their mouths slightly open, eyes wide. The song built up to its final line, and Emily held the note, clear, powerful, and filled with everything she had ever felt. It seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with emotion. When the last note faded, there was silence. For a long moment, the whole hall stood still, as if time had stopped. Then suddenly the crowd erupted into applause. People were on their feet, clapping, cheering, shouting her name. The judges stood up too, smiling, nodding, impressed. One of them even wiped away a tear. Emily stood there frozen, her eyes filling with tears. She pressed a hand over her chest, overwhelmed by the sound of hundreds of people clapping just for her. The host came onto the stage and said into the microphone, "Ladies and gentlemen, that was incredible. Let's give her another round of applause." The crowd cheered louder. Emily smiled, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Thank you." The same judge who had interrupted her in the first audition spoke into his microphone. "Sometimes," he said, "you meet someone who reminds you what music is really about. You reminded us today." The audience clapped again and Emily bowed deeply. She could barely believe what was happening. As she walked off the stage, her legs felt light, her heart full. The two girls who had mocked her stood near the exit, silent. One of them gave a small nod as if saying sorry without words. Emily didn't need their apology. She had already moved past it. When she got backstage, the staff members congratulated her. Some even hugged her. "You're going viral after this," one of them said with a grin. That performance was magic. Emily laughed through her tears. She didn't know about fame or social media. All she knew was that she had finally done what she came to do. She had sung her heart out, and people had felt it. Later that night, as she sat alone near the stage steps, she looked up at the now empty auditorium. The lights were dim, but her heart was still glowing. For the first time in her life, she didn't doubt herself. She whispered softly, "This is just the beginning," and deep inside she knew it was true.